I'm going to read new poems tonight. As Sally mentioned, my new book is not going to be out until 2023, but I'm going to read some poems from that manuscript in progress. The first one is called Biopsy Pantoum, and it was published in American Poetry Review in the autumn edition, September, October. It's called Biopsy Pantoum. I am waiting for biopsy results again in the mirrored room where time stalls, knowing women are always at the mercy of men. Even after I get the results, it will feel like my fault. In the mirrored room where time stalls, I stare at the same insipid face. Even after I get the results, it will feel like my fault. I walk the treadmill, regretting what I can't erase. I stare at the same insipid face. The longer I carry my body, the harder it is to tend. I walk the treadmill, regretting what I can't erase. Until I die, this worry will not end. The longer I carry my body, the harder it is to tend. Knowing women are always at the mercy of men. Until I die, this worry will not end. I am waiting for biopsy results again. And this next poem is from a series in my new collection of Memento Mori poems. And they're all sonnets. And this one is called Memento Mori Pistachios. I never know I'm an animal more than when I shell pistachios in the kitchen after washing dishes, waiting for you to come home. I know how I must look, cracking the tight shells, popping the small green nut into my open mouth again and again. I never knew your trick to pry a stubborn shell, slit not wide enough to open. You showed me how to place half a discarded shell in the small opening, like a tool. It frightens me, my new resourcefulness, my hunger, the way I wait for you, as if I will never have enough. And the next poem is called Antigone Reads Bedtime Books. And my little girl is being very good letting me do this reading tonight at 10 o'clock when it's supposed to be her nighttime stories hour. So this one is for her. Antigone Reads Bedtime Books. You always want to hear the one about the moon, not because it's celestial, but for its closure. You love the way it lets you say goodbye. No shocking departure, no tricks. Predictable, you memorized it without trouble. In bed alone, that big room still looms, each familiar object lined up to be named. Maybe that's the comfort, naming the way gods do, to look upon the ordinary and form new sounds in the mouth. I named you 8 years before you were born, after reading a book about a river who was a girl who was a river. I knew you would be dark and dangerous like my mother, my grandmother. I did what none of them could do. I took you to me, regardless of your doomed blood, the family curse. When I hold your bulky body, the shame disappears. Even the moon listens as I sing to you. So strange is my simple voice. And this is another Antigone poem. Antigone visits the psychiatric hospital. The guard confiscates the small spiral-bound notebook I bought her at the dollar store. The pink plastic cord could be pulled from the pages and used to injure herself, he explains, as if I should have known not to bring it. Magazines with smiling women in swimsuits are sanctioned as if they will teach her how to look happy. The music I transfer to a small silver device makes it in, but does not please her. Vacant, She gazes past me, her thick hair twisted in a bun. She's more beautiful than she was at her wedding. She begs me to get her out of the locked ward, says she cannot sleep one more night in this place. The doctor asks if I brought a word search, as if finding nouns in a field of scattered letters could fix this. How can I tell her I know the corners of chaos where her mind has lured and trapped her? How can I unpeel myself from this vinyl love seat and leave her with leering nurses and patients? How can I turn around and press the buzzer for the guard to open the door and let me walk out again into the strange July sun? And just a couple more poems. This one is another Memento Mori, Central Park Polar Bear. After reading that he died, I am relieved. For 27 years, he swam laps all day, slicing the water, his 700 pounds, muscle, tendon, yellowing fur, black eyes have all turned to ash. The week you were diagnosed, I pushed your stroller 33 blocks for our first pilgrimage to the zoo. You recognized him from your board book and flapped your arms in sync with his strokes. Unseasonably warm for October, we stood, stunned inside sweaters, embroidered with flowers of forgetfulness. I was the only one fixed in front of his small tank who saw how sad it was that he barreled in backstrokes of figure eights. His giant paws slashed the cloudy water, knowing he would never get anywhere, despite how hard he tried. 16 years later, you still run or pace back and forth in our living room, with or without music, babbling your indecipherable language. Your swimmer shoulders cut the empty air all night as you make patterns on the threadbare rug. And two more poems. This one is called Memento Mori Birdhead. This is a suitable end to February, waking and drawing the blinds to discover a bird's head stuck by its own blood to the sill outside the window. 33 floors up, a hawk devoured the body on the roof and discarded the eyeless head. Its beak, long and curved, looks like the Venetian plague doctor's mask that hung on a red velvet ribbon in my first apartment. Stubborn, the head sits, a reminder of what this winter has taken and what still remains 3 weeks before spring. As soon as I roll a newspaper and push the head off the ledge to the stubby shrubs below, I regret it. The dried blood still smeared on the gray ledge resembles a daub of red paint a child tried to scrape from her thumb. On my first organ donor form, I checked off each box except eyes, as if there were some way to save sight even after death. And this last poem is called May. It's one of the prose poems in my new collection. America's new disease and old disease keep killing. The names of the dead fill the newspapers. Only some of us are safe. This country was stolen, built on blood and lies. History is not the past. On the news, the president denies everything we know to be true. Orwell wrote, "The party told you to reject the evidence of your eyes and ears. It was their final, most essential command." In a slanted room, the stone-hearted judge plots with the single-minded precision of a serial killer. White candles burn down to the wick, and the succulents need to be replanted. Since you can't sleep, read about exploding stars in supernovas that scattered the calcium of all human bones and teeth, and how Stephen Hawking proved there is no God. My friend's son asks, whenever he hears sirens, if cops are coming to kill him. My daughter's brain is stuck at 20 months, trapped in her body of 19 years. She doesn't yet know about hatred, but someday her silence will destroy her. We cannot be saved, but I wish some God would save them. The cherry trees are about to flower. The buds are small, bloody fists. Thank you.
I'm going to begin by reading a poem from my first collection, Frozen Spring, titled Ascension, which begins with an epigraph by the naturalist Faith McNulty. It takes 7 strong men to drag the 6-foot heart of a blue whale across the deck of a whaling ship. Beads of sweat well up on the sea-stained faces of the 7 men who bear the still warm heart of the blue whale to the boiling vats. The men are deliverers. They tug, rip, tear the heart across the deck to the seething pots, but their hands stick to surfaces like fly paper and recoil, the red matter teething into fingers as if leaching out the blood. Ventricles, gaping mouths stand ajar, red smoke rises in the darkening mist. Harsh wind raps against crevices, something trying to get back in, tapping out an aberrant beat, an unknown code, and something whines long and low, a sea moan. Only a crane can lift a 6-foot heart, and as the last inch of the raised organ recedes into the stewing vats, dismembered parts of the heart ascend and billow over the deck. 7 men inhale the vision, their hearts slackening with each breath. I wanted to read some poems from Cracked Piano, which is the collection that Jennifer mentioned that came out, published by Cabin Carry Press in 2019. And one of the thematic cores of the book is a thin line between sanity and insanity. In the latter half of the 19th century, as part of a humanistic movement in the treatment of mental patients, hospital superintendents held balls for their patients, and spectators were sometimes invited. The Lunatic Ball, after Dance in a Madhouse, a painting by George Bellows, who lived from 1882 to 1925. Furious dancing gives way to screams. 5 men stare ghoulish at the wall. This is a lunatic ball. The best student Yale had ever seen, 3 months after graduation, typhoid, brain swelled inside his skull. They dosed out calomel. 5 ghosts appeared in a mercury dream, headaches unbearable. This is a lunatic ball. Married 1 year, baby the next. His wife filed for release. The medical textbooks he gleaned, futile, endless stall. A woman names her baby doll Christ, lurches, leans, a building in an earthquake, then she crawls. This is a lunatic ball. 1 man plays a flute, calls himself Faunus. Another uses an invisible latrine. Attendants haul out a wild man in a straitjacket on a wooden beam. A woman growls like a bear. This is a lunatic ball. Behind a glass wall, well-dressed spectators riveted sit amused. Looking at them, the patients know they are through. Spectacled men sport greatcoats, and laced up women make jokes in the shimmering hall. Another thematic core of the book is the mercurial role of mothers and the subjugation of women. And I wanted to read one of the poems on splitting wood. It was the thought of his entering their infant's room that drove her. She remembered his face the first time she saw him, now half gone from whiskey, eyes hooded like a hawk's. He said he'd kill the children when he woke. The neighbors heard it, the screams, they heard. His workman's hand, his gnarled hand dangled down. The knife lay by the bed. She slipped from the covers while he slept, placed her feet on the floorboards just so. The dogs barked outside, snapdragons, flowered tongues, and all the wired faces of the past strung up. The axe hung on the porch, wood pile nearby, each log plotted, uneasily entwined. The children's tears were rain. Tears were watering the parched hills. The wild moon foamed at the mouth. The wild moon crept softly at her feet. The arms that grabbed the axe were not her own, that hugged it to her heart while he slept were not hers, the cold blade sinking in his skin. She grew up in the country splitting wood. She knew just how much it took to bring a limb down. I'd like to read an elegy next, which is for my mother and for nature. My mother is dying. In the place where she belongs, suffering erases itself. Doves bring her seeds, horses sleep next to her in the straw. Where she belongs, a welcoming place holds her, keeps her from running away, the greenness of the hay turning to gold. Already the rain's restless trajectory, my mother is busy dying. She no longer knows my name. This is the wind of Eden, the wand of change, the last slave of silence, the knave of rain. So quiet the roving of each vacant quest. Let her be buried in the sea by the seaberry, the briar rock, the fossil chamber. Alone, blown, roadside stray, the flown, restless, wayward ringing, bells clang, ocean downcast rolls. Wandering once again, now I return to the center, searching the level earth, calling her name, remembering that I am lost. The path unfurls before my dog and me walking to the rocks, the ocean on one side, the bay on the other, eiders blessing the waves. The seagull's spontaneous burst, how it hurts with the radio blaring. My mother is dying, gone from a body that has abandoned her. Cry because everything goes haywire, because this is Apollo's siren lyre, the field-worn answer, the childless response, children waiting for some God to bring them home. Some people have asked me if this virtual background is the ocean, but it's actually the Hudson River near where I live. And that is what was the Tappan Zee Bridge, and now the Mario Cuomo Bridge. And that's the Sleepy Hollow Lighthouse. And it's not the ocean. But I did want to read another poem from this collection, which a number of the poems are ekphrastic, and I wanted to read one of them. This is a poem that was inspired by Rosa Bonheur's The Horse Fair, which is on view at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Horse Fair. In men's clothes, she makes herself invisible to examine anatomy at the slaughterhouse. She obtains a police permit to wear trousers while she sketches. At the horse fair, she draws horses pulling, snorting, heads bumping, thrashing, hooves pounding, tails ringing, charging forward, rearing, bucking, wheeling, disappearing into darkness. Hooves hammer, whips crack, horses writhe, between seer and seen, the fairground a battleground. Frenzied pitch, cymbals clash, arms flail, whips raised against the horses' arched and shining necks. Eyes bulge, terrified, the dappled gray, the roan pull away toward thunder. And I'd like to read a couple of poems from my latest chapbook, which Jennifer mentioned, and it's also, that's actually a picture of a moose, which looks like a ghost, but it was published in 2019 by Cattywampus Press. And some of the poems are on the sixth extinction, which is one of the greatest extinctions that we're currently living through, and the only one created by humans. But I'm going to read one of the poems that's not on that and theme, and it's titled Dolls. The dolls wait for the children to wake up. They lie on their backs, staring upwards as though the ceiling were a resting place. For them, love is what counts, holding them, talking softly, making certain they sleep comfortably in their beds. Knowing how to dress dolls is an art. Just what color socks each takes, like pouring tea, how many gowns, where the shoes go. Dressing could take all day or just a second. Dirt sticks to a doll. Remember, rain is not right for her. Exposure to the elements breaks down a doll's resistance. Wait until storms abate before leaving with your doll. Time means nothing to her. She will wonder about rain, about everything trains bring. Tree flowers drape light strands like spider babies in soft wind. Dolls are restless on their feet all day, listening for helicopters. They gather on roads after rainfall to smell the concrete getting wet, the newly soaked pavement almost drunk after a dry spell. Dolls on boats head for rocks in high winds. How many times they wish the boat could reverse. But before motors were invented, everyone jumped ship. Each day, supermarket racks sport headlines. Dolls gone sour, dolls born with beards, hair grown with snakes, Medusa-like. And let's see, I'm going to read two more poems. The next one, I was going to say the subtext for it would have seemed impossible to me not too many years ago. End of horses. I write to you from the end of the time zone. You must realize that nothing survived after the horses were slaughtered. We sleep below the hollow, burned out stars. We look into dust bowls searching for horses. When you walk in the country, you will be shocked to meet substantial masses on the road. We do not know whom to accuse or where the horses were driven, who slaughtered them or for what purpose. Had the horses slept under the linden trees, the generals and engineers pucker and snore on the veranda. And the last poem that I will read is a found poem in the sense that I just rediscovered it. I'd lost it after publishing it in 1996 in a chapbook, and I just forgot about it. So I thought I would read it tonight. And its title is Treehouse. Something about roots, bone-like, tenacious, that grip the moving ground. The branches like umbrellas bent back and broken by the storm. The leaves veined references to hands, and the sound of the wind's wild workings against the leaves. The boy collected the branches and stored them under his bed. Something about the trees seeped into his dreams, the trunk a hallway, the branches outlined rooms, and his family finding shelter in the boughs, listening to the sound language of leaves. He did not see a garden, apples, or any fires. Everyone huddled together to keep warm. Thank you very much. And
I'll start. The first poem I'd like to read is an old poem. It was written after 9/11. Each year you hear the people who perished, the names read on the radio. So I read it tonight in honor of those we've lost to COVID. It's called Their Names. Their names. Like a rain I feel but cannot see, the names of the dead falling. Silences I hear between first names, middle, last, are slivers of empty air between lines of rain. I want to be in these tiny silences that cannot hold their deaths, but join them to all silence. Rests in a piece of music, the quiet beneath a rock, the feather on a crow, beak closed, wings perfectly still. One of the bright points of the pandemic, if one can even use that terminology, is that my daughter Angie and husband Brett have become pregnant, and literally if my phone goes off, this is it, and she's almost due. And so there are, I think, 3 poems I'm going to read for her. They're new. First one is called After Winter Solstice. Because you were pregnant, the days grow rounder with light. The long oaks bend towards each other as through a glass orb. Loose blouses like snowdrifts. I wish I had sung to you more when you were inside me and carried you less like the marriage I knew was failing. I wish I could have kept my mind in the same place as my body. This year, the winter will not drag on. I will measure the accruing light in your changing form. Who knows what settles as I watch you slice the peaches? Maybe a future entomologist's fingers are finding their first meticulous rhythm. Maybe the delicate register of your child's voice is gathering its notes. Kitchen visit. The purple carrot's taste does not live up to its exotic appearance. Handsome is as handsome does, is what my grandmother would have said, though likely not about a carrot. Dead for 40 years, my grandmother arrives, this time in her blue print dress with the large front pockets that never served as pockets, though she always let me look inside. Frost laces our front window, and a single moth blinks like a human eye. The pane of glass between us. The purple carrot on the counter cannot account for why my grandmother appears. Now as a moth on the window, and later again as knitted sweaters folded in my closet, just the way she taught me. First the arms towards the heart, and then the waist folding up to the neck of the sweater. Like the impossible pose in yoga, she is holding for me now, as only a ghost can, and inhabiting my pregnant daughter, herself a yoga teacher. I can sense her there, looking out at me from the womb where her first great-grandchild grows. And this last one, I guess it was written a week or 2 ago when the trees are just, getting those little buds, but not quite the leaves. So it's called Full Term. The contours of the branches clear, though softened by a gauzy green, as lingerie might soften the curves of a hip or a breast, as a teenage boy's sparse facial hair might soften the lines of his chin. This is the time before the leaves take shape, uncrank themselves like awnings at cafes, morning dew dripping on the small round tables, beneath the color of the sky that will change you forever. Teach your palm to open beneath your baby's head, the crook of your arm to cradle, your breasts to heavy themselves with milk like buckets beneath the eaves full of rain. And now with only weeks left, the grass, brilliant, green, all possibility. These next two poems, one is for my dad and one is for my mom, neither of whom are living. And the one for my dad is called Gray Whale, and gray whale is not a color descriptor, it is a type of whale. I didn't know that when I first wrote the poem. Gray Whale. When they read the metal tag on her pectoral fin, a surprise of dark Cyrillic letters on this gray whale, who had swum some 14,000 miles, interbraiding continent with continent, self with self. Strange that I think of you now, Father, though you too had lived, mostly below a surface, the breadth of which we could not know. Until they read the tag, the cetologists had thought the gray whales off the coast of Baja were of a different species from the ones in Minsk. When I found your lacquer boxes, so small they fit into my hand with their depictions of our home, the pots above the stove, their odd discolorations, the cheerful curtained windows that looked out at the pines. I felt sad I had not known your heart would swim such distance for us. You had never shown us one. And how small you had to make yourself to see each seam and paint it, like an ant stepping carefully along one of those dark passages in its hill of dirt that nobody sees inside. This one is for my mom. And in her last couple of years, she had very severe dementia. And I visited her often, and it was a real treat. She was often in kind of a sort of semi-conscious state, but sometimes she'd awake a little bit. So anyway, mother. Little stirrings in the dried fallen leaves along the path, as when I speak to my old mother and her eyes widen for a moment, then close. She sits in her chair, tweed jacket, well coiffed, looking as she did in her day, though now someone else must dress her, lift the blouse from the hanger, help her slip it on the way she once did for me. Grab the cuff, she'd say. The soft tunnel of sleeve would hold me. Sometimes we sing. She only vaguely mouths the words, though occasionally she'll drift along on a note like a leaf lifted by wind before it stills. If I sit by her on the couch, she'll put her head near mine, my hand in hers. Her body is how she remembers now, the way the growth of a tree, the twists of its branches recall the rain, the snow, the sun. This next one is kind of a pandemic poem, not about the pandemic, but written during. I've always felt a real closeness to the natural world, and during the pandemic, it was really heightened. I think so, seeing so few people, you start talking to trees. But anyway, this one's called Birches. I walk the rough stone driveway, and from their long white trunks, brighter than winter air, I sense their dark eyes watching, motionless, without judgment, as when taking something fully in. I know these eyes are wounds healed over or scars from branches fallen, and I know the language between us is untranslatable. But for the entire 3-mile hike, I sense their eyes behind me, holding me as I might hold an overfull glass of water, meniscus trembling in the white winter sky. As they look with great precision, measure me as I grow smaller by the mailbox, letter in my hand. And though at a great distance, I can feel them taking in the loops and dips in the black script of the address and its return, as I might observe without distinction the wreaths of moss around their trunks if I were focusing on something else or everything at once. Naomi Shihab Nye, who I'm sure many of you all know, has started this project, and it's poems addressing the vaccine, Dear Vaccine. And it's really cool. It's this website, and anyone, 5 to 95, poet, non-poet, doesn't matter to her at all. She puts everything up, and it is really such a groundswell of positive feeling around the vaccine. It's pretty inspiring. I keep seeing it as a wall somewhere down in Miami or something, just a huge long wall with everyone's writings on it. But this is my kind of stab at it. No pun intended there, actually. Dear Vaccine. Dear Vaccine, I am watching the nurse lift the small vial of you, clear as any cloudless sky. Because we have the cow to thank for your name, dear Vaccine, I am picturing 4 or 5 red Angus in a long grassed field, unfettered as the few good decisions I have made. The nurse lifts the syringe, then dabs my arm. And there's one cow in particular, standing by the weather-worn post and rail fence, the kind that lined the fields of my childhood. And this bovine's eyes shine like the pond where we dunk ourselves to ease the sweltering days, lying afterwards side by side on the warm granite slab. Dear Vaccine, I'm remembering one afternoon when Lila nearly drowned, and Father dove in, dove down, and pulled her up, blue but coughing. And we all cried with the kind of relief we'd never felt before. I watched the nurse and thanked her, and thanked her, and thanked her once more. I'll just read 2 more poems. This next one's called Quahog, and it's just a kind of clam up in Maine. Quahog. Along the shore, like white eyelids, bleached, dead clams, I see one that is alive. I stop and watch it open. The 2 locked lids of its dull shell let emerge a delicate foot, like a white peony petal, that lifts the grains of sand, burying itself until what is left is a pucker on the tidal flats, pulsing. The sand is freckled with many such holes, and I feel let in on a secret, as when I caught the scraps of your voice, and I knocked, and you showed me the letter from your father who left when you were 5, and you told me that you read it, sometimes aloud, its white rectangle, a door you keep open like a clam's thin siphon. And I'll just end with this little short one. Readers of the Farmer's Almanac out there, anybody? I don't know, there's lots of funny sayings that are, Cindy is, lots of funny sayings that are in there. And the one that I spotted was, watch for the shoulders of the beets to protrude above the soil. I thought, okay.
It's beautiful.
So it's called beets, as in the vegetable. Yes to the shoulders of the beets, an upward tug on red veined leaves, as if might follow miniature torsos, legs, and feet. Today I rescue them as men I have loved, because for a moment, in this guise, they can all be good. Thanks a lot for listening, and
This is a new book that came out through Goldfish Press, and it's called Love Island. It's about this little island where I live in Puget Sound on Vashon Island. And this poem is about a couple of salmon runs we have here, and I've been able to observe over the years. It's called Stone and Bone. I want to become a stone in this meandering river, large enough to hold my place through spring floods, small enough for a returning salmon to consider, nose me gently before struggling a little further upstream, where she will dig into lighter gravel, a nest for her bright orange eggs, attracting the blood-colored males already on their way to death, until both open-mouthed mix egg and seed together. And after she covers each nest, no longer able to resist the relentless downstream current as it carries her spent body gently back over hard-won rippled river bottom to the last place she rests, stone and bone together, bleached white and worn with weather, water, and time, inanimate, unnoticed, and dreaming. Once molten, born in a river of fire, cooled to stillness by a river of ice, the other a silver sea traveler, until natal desire compels her into sinuous red light. Thank you.
Treat. I wrote this poem today. It's about my grandmother, who was about 4.5 feet tall, and she had about a foot long hair, puffed hair. It's called Guts. My grandmother's hand plunges into the chicken's deepest, darkest cavity, leans over the formica counter, and holds its heart the size of her thumb. 2 pink lungs wiggle between her fingers. She tosses them into a pan, fries them with onions and schmaltz. Everything for my grandmother is by eye and taste. She seasons them with salt and pepper to chop, gripping the half-moon blade into a large, scratched wooden bowl. Her tanned, muscular arm jiggle like jello, and as she sings along with Mathis and taps her and kicks her slippered feet to Benny Goodman. Whatever leftover green guts and other clumps linger on the counter, she flings them into the empty sink. I watch them slink and slur, funneling into a sea foam of soap, down the drain and into her brand new garbage disposal. Thank you.
It's me fine. I'm going to read 2 short poems. I'm still, I think I mentioned last week, I'm still doing this 30-day poetry marathon facilitated by Lisa Gert. And we're on day 26 now. So I'm producing a poem a day, and it's been a challenge. I'm kind of exhausted, but full of poems from the marathon. So they're all in first draft. After the argument, you sit across from me, scattered shadows slant across your body. I watch you dig at the dried out wooden table with your thumbnail, your face composed, but I see shoulders more slumped than usual. Hear the regular tap of your shoe on the floor, deliberate, hoping to distract me. I start to speak. You look past me with feigned disinterest. I know you are listening. I know you so well. You have scolded me, I say, blanched my flesh. You retort, my bones rattle so easily these days. Only the scaffold of my body that you pushed out into the cold remains. You take my hand, look down, squeeze so gently. Never again, you say. I nod, just the once. And the second poem is called Broken Syntax. It has an epigraph by Rumi. Be grateful for whatever comes, because each has been sent as a guide from beyond. My mother's body is rigid. even as she bends down to sweep last night's ashes from the grate. Soon, I think she will crack. 2 pieces of mother will be more difficult to deal with than 1. Your mother loads the shotgun, rests it on the moss-green carpet beside your stiff bear. She has no one to talk to here. Forgetting your mother tongue is not the same thing as having never learnt it at all. At school, you draw fallen blossoms on a winding path in my math book. The flower petals are crisp at first, more smudged when the lead wears down. You touch my sadness. I cannot approach your silence. Instead, I pass you my sharpened pencil. We walk home side by side along the river. You stop to point at a sheet of ice in the shape of a corpse. I pick up a stone, throw it at the head. It lands instead like a bullet to the chest. Burying your first love does not equate with never having been loved at all. Thank you.
This is actually the title poem from a manuscript I've been working on for about 30 years. And it's all of the poems are about trying to find a way to deal with different forms of reality. My father had Alzheimer's, and this poem was actually almost verbatim from a conversation I had from him when he was 97 years old, as if it were true. He calls me from his hospital room. I'm in the street. I'm buying you pears because you take good care of me. At first I worry. Is he in the street? Whose phone are you using? I don't know. I'll check. Hey, who are you? A woman's voice answers. She is now on the phone. Who is this? She asks. I'm Cindy, his daughter. Your father was worried, so I let him call. So he's not in the street? No, she confirms. He's here in his room. My father's voice is in the background. He is now on the phone. I tell him I'm coming. I tell him 2 hours. 2 hours, he shouts. 2 hours again. So then I lie. I will be there soon, in a couple of minutes. I'll tell her now. She answers aside. He's in Montefiore Hospital, room 312. And then to his voice, she knows where you are. A moment, a while, 10 minutes, 2 seconds. We say this to people every day as if it were true. Dad, I will see you in 15 minutes. I will meet you on the corner. I will bring you pears.